Hello. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the two types of parenting plans and why you should know the difference. Stay tuned. Welcome to Wellness with John. I'm John Peters. These are resources to help you thrive. And this video is a part of a series that I'm doing on co-parenting after divorce. So if you want to start at the beginning of the series, just look in the description. I'll put a link to the playlist so you can watch all the videos in the series if you want. But why am I talking about this? If you're new to the channel and new to me or new to this sequence, I'm a therapist. I've been in practice for 27 years, and a big part of what I've done over the last 27 years is work with thousands of separated parents to help them cope, to help them co-parent effectively after divorce, and to help them help their children cope with their separation. And so I've been a therapist, a co-parent coach. I worked for 10 years as a civil mediator, mediating divorces. I've been an expert witness in courtrooms in divorce cases, and I've written 2 books on the subject, right? So I've had a lot of exposure to a lot of cases of families going through divorce, which is why I'm sharing this information with you in this sequence. So in this video, I want to talk about 2 different types of parenting plans. And you may not even really be thinking about a parenting plan. A lot of parents kind of just do it ad hoc and don't really conceptualize what a parenting plan can be. But I want to talk to you a little bit about why it's useful to not only think about what your parenting plan is, but to think about it as 2 different types of instruments that you can work with to your advantage, to your ex's advantage, and for the best interest of your children. So what am I talking about? Well, broadly speaking, a parenting plan is just clarity about things that have to do with parenting, in this case, through and after separation. So every day that your kid is alive as your kid's parent, you actually make a whole bunch of choices, some not so big in the grand scheme of things in terms of consequences, like what shirt they'll wear to school. But you also decide what they're going to eat for lunch. You decide whether they're going to take a summer camp program this summer, or where they're going to be after school if you have to work late. So there are all these decisions that we make about parenting our kids. And this comes into view in a special way when people get divorced, usually because people are focused on the legal aspect of agreements or disputed and later court-ordered edicts about how they're going to parent, okay? And so the thin version that a lot of parents do is basically think about the parenting plan as the elements of things that go into the divorce petition, or the issues that they fight about in court, and the things that the judge eventually is going to write in the final divorce decree. All right. So if you only think of the parenting plan that way, then number one, it's insufficient in terms of what it covers. And number two, people often use the legal system to try to define things that are better served as being defined outside of the legal realm. And I'm actually going to make a full video about this. It might be the next video in this series, we'll see. But the legal system has limitations on how much it can address legitimate family needs and children's needs. And so part of my complaint, which I'll say more about later, is that parents try to rely on the legal parenting plan as really being sufficient for all of the elements that they're going to have to deal with as a parent, and all of the elements that you have to deal with your ex as a co-parent, right? And why is that insufficient if you rely on the legal framework as a template for your parenting plan? Because basically the judge wants to know a limited set of things related to your divorce. And I don't speak for all judges, but I think in general, the judges want to know as little about your lives and your divorce as possible. And this is partly because they don't want to be too intrusive on your rights, but also because, as I said, and I'll talk about more later, people bring all kinds of battles into the legal arena that just aren't ever going to be solved by a judge. So I know a lot of judges cringe when they have to deal with a lot of messy court cases, which is how I got my start in this career, by the way. The local court system wanted to send for therapeutic negotiation their worst cases that they couldn't get to go away. So hopefully we could try to do something to improve them. But anyway, what are the elements that go into a legal parenting plan that relate to what people are doing in their petition, in the court battle, and what they expect to see in the final decree? By the way, as a disclaimer, even though I've played all those roles that I mentioned earlier in divorce cases, I'm not a lawyer. So do not take anything I say in this video or any other video as legal advice, okay? But I have opinions from the standpoint of someone who's worked in a lot of legal cases about the issues that exist in cases of divorce, and also issues that exist in how people interface with the legal system. So that's the part I'm going to comment on, but I'm not telling you legal advice. You should get a competent attorney and get your legal questions answered for yourself, okay? But what people focus on, back to the main point here, what people focus on in the legal process is, what is the parenting schedule? So when is the kid going to be where and with whom? Number two, what is the form of custody, which you could think of as the domains of decision-making in the kid's life. So decisions like who's the pediatrician, where does the kid go to school, and things like that. That falls into the realm of custody, which is confusing because we think about custody as I have something with me, so I'm in custody of it, which points toward the parenting time schedule. But the way custody gets defined in legal divorce cases is decision-making domains, right? So if someone has so-called sole custody, then they can make sole decisions, even if the other parent doesn't agree with them about who the pediatrician is. If people have so-called joint custody, then the expectation is that the parents are going to cooperate to make joint decisions about things like who is the pediatrician, okay? There are lots of ways to carve up decision-making, and I'm not going to make too much of a point of that now because that could be its own video. But basically, you have parenting time schedule, you have custody, which is decision-making, and often child support is addressed. So often one party has some encumbrance to pay the other party some monthly figure of child support. And if you're confused about child support, go to your state's website. There's usually a calculator. At least there's a downloadable worksheet with the algorithm, and you can just plug in the numbers and it'll give you an idea of what your child support encumbrance would be. But those are the three main elements that get defined in divorce decrees. And so when parents are thinking about, well, what is our parenting plan? Because understandably, a lot of parents are focused on the legal divorce process, then those are the things that often people mostly or completely focus on to try to address. So what's our schedule? What's our decision-making type? And what do we think is going to happen with child support, okay? That's all fine, okay? I'm not poo-pooing that. I'm just saying that it's insufficient, which is why we have to talk about another type of parenting plan, all right? So if you don't offer some of those ideas that I just listed in your petition, the judge is going to ask you why you didn't offer it and want clarity, okay? So divorce petitions generally include at least those three elements, right? And again, you can go talk to your lawyer about whether your lawyer advises you to include other stuff, but those are the basic elements. But why is that insufficient? Well, one reason that it's insufficient is even if you had the perfect divorce petition, you don't have the decree yet, right? So you start off day one in the legal divorce process, and it may be day 90, day 180, day 365. Your final decree that gives you the black and white legal answer to questions about what the schedule is going to happen down the line, okay? So one reason that the legal process is insufficient is between today and whenever you get that final decree, your kid needs you to be making decisions for them, right? So there's this interim phase where you and your kid's other parent have to be making decisions for your kid. And your kid can't like go into stasis somewhere and you hit the pause button on life and then you sit around and wait for the final decree, right? So the other type of parenting plan comes into play partly because you actually have to be muddling through even if you don't know what the final version of the agreements are going to be. Okay, so that's one reason the legal process is insufficient. Reason number two that the legal process is insufficient is that in reality, I would say most, if not all parents, do not want the final decree to spell out the many, many dozens and dozens of things that as a parent you have to agree to cooperate around and deal with as a parent with your kid. You don't want those spelled out in the final decree. And why do you not want them in the final decree? Because, for one thing, anything that goes into the final decree becomes something you can fight about later. And the more granular you get with specific parenting plans and agreements, it creates a legal document that you can then dispute in the legal realm and carry on unendingly if you want, okay? Which isn't my advice, of course. But one reason to be more structural in a bare bones way with the information that leads to the final decree is that it unencumbers you from those fights about the granular details, all right? So for example, if you agreed and it got put into your final legal divorce decree that Johnny is going to be at the ballpark for softball practice on exactly July 1st every year, okay? Let's say for some reason that got put into your final decree. Well, what happens when you get near July 1st and Johnny's on vacation with one of you? By mutual agreement, right? Do you get into a battle over flying Johnny home from the vacation to get to softball practice? I mean, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. The more granular you get in the final decree with all sorts of things, it encumbers you to have to follow it, and it raises more issues that you can fight about. So again, I'm not saying that we leave nothing, or we leave everything out of the final decree to avoid those fights. It's just that that's the counterbalancing or one counterbalancing issue with getting too granular in that, right? But as I said a minute ago, we have to get granular because we have to make decisions about, is he going to softball practice or not? Is he going on vacation with one of us or not? And when, So the second type of parenting plan is one that more comprehensively and in a more granular way addresses lots of things that you and your kid's other parent actually agree on, and it clarifies what those agreements are in an informal way. Informal meaning we're not going to introduce them as part of the legal proceeding to try to get them ordered by the judge, okay? So the other reason that you don't want to get too granular with the legal stuff in the divorce decree is that you want to be able to have the flexibility to deal with life as it evolves for your kid, and so what they're up to this year may not be exactly what they're up to next year for developmental reasons, school reasons, social group reasons. There are all these reasons that life swirls around and changes, and we adapt to it. And so a lot of things that you do want to be collaborative with your other parent around to support your kid in having the best life possible, you don't necessarily want to spell out in a court decree that then limits your flexibility to evolve with your kids' evolving needs. Okay, so that's the third reason. But let me switch gears here for a second and talk about this informal type of parenting plan and what that looks like in contrast to the legal thing that I was just describing, and why we need to have that idea alongside the one that we're doing for the legal process. So the informal plan basically is anything that you or your ex want to include as some element that you can clarify about what your agreements are to parent your kid, okay? And you could think about this as, one way to approach it is to think about it as your kid has needs, and those needs exist in domains, and within each of those domains, there are lots of choices that we make for our kid, right? So for example, you want your kid to be healthy. Within the health domain, what diet do they follow? When do they take their meds if they have meds prescribed? What medical care do they get? What doctors do they see? Who's their pediatrician? And do they have a medical history? And we need to maybe create a portable health document for better competent care plans when they do need medical care and things like that. So that's the health domain. We might have, if your kid's active with extracurricular activities or sports, there's the activities domain, which has to do with how are we getting him to softball practice, or how are we getting him to this club after school, or what summer camps are they going to take, right? Things like that. There's the educational domain. How do we deal with school-related expenses? So if you think about it, your kid does stuff, and you don't have to get perfect about like, how do I carve up this domain and that domain, and does this go in this domain or that? I just think that thinking about domains of life, social life, school life, health, activities, that's sometimes a good way to organize what you're thinking about, okay? And so within those domains, as I mentioned, that there are all these different things that you're going to think of in your head, and then you're going to negotiate with your kid's other parent. And with maybe not all, but with many of those things, you're going to come to some clarity, right? Now, as time goes on, it's not like you have to walk around with a manual and be referring to your agreement manual with your ex. It becomes just something that you know and you naturally work with. But in the earlier phase of separating and soon after separation, it's just not possible for you to magically think of all the things that really need to be clarified in an informal parenting plan and also have your ex magically be in agreement with all those, okay? So, and as I said a minute ago, the situation evolves. So what your kid needs today may not be what they need 3 months from now, right? So you can't just magically have understanding and agreement about all the decisions. And this is one source of conflict between separated parents is if I think I'm clear in my head, then you should be clear in your head and we should be in agreement. Well, if you go by that assumption, you're going to run up against disagreement and fights with your ex. So what's the antidote to that? That is having actual conversations to negotiate individual elements that you then include in an informal parenting plan. What I recommend is that you get a notebook or you open a document on your computer and you start just brainstorming all the different things that you and your ex may need to have some mutual awareness around, even if it's not shared responsibility. So I'm not necessarily only talking about things where like 50-50, we're going to split, anytime our kid needs a new coat for winter. It's not just the stuff that's completely shared, but it's stuff that you and your ex are going to agree about. Like how many days or weeks notice will we give the other parent when we plan our work vacation that might impact the parenting schedule? There are all these different things that relate to parenting effectively after separation. You can't think of them all at once, which is why it's good to have a notebook and just start brainstorming and writing things as you think about them. But what you do is you come up with things, and then you and your ex have conversations around, well, what do we think about that, right? Again, after some time passes and you fall into some natural kind of pattern with all of this, you don't need to be having as many of those conversations because things are just settled and agreed upon, right? So like today, 20 years out from my daughter, the divorce between my daughter's mom and I know the answer to pretty much any question you can ask about our parenting plan. So does her mom. And we're just not fighting about much of that at this point, right? So if you ask a question like, if one of you takes elective vacation and she goes with you, to what degree, if at all, is the other parent on the hook to offer some financial support for that vacation? I know the answer to that. So does her mom. But did we know that magically the day that we separated? No, we didn't. How did we figure that out? We had conversations about it, right? So you don't wake up the day that you decide to get divorced and magically know all the stuff that you and your kid's other parent need to know and need to have agreements about. It just doesn't work that way, right? And even if you already have, a pattern of agreement about certain things, the ballgame changes when you separate. So even things that you think you already know, you really have to clarify and sometimes have conversations around. Even if they don't change, you need to clarify them. So just to be clear, I'm not saying that you come up with all these elements in an informal parenting plan and then submit that as part of the legal divorce process. I'm actually saying the opposite. I'm saying 90% or more of whatever you write in your informal plan isn't going to be desirable to have in the legal process. And in fact, and I'll talk about this in the video that I'll probably do next about the legal system, but you really don't want to be in court fighting about all that stuff. When I used to work more closely with certain types of cases, I would get a subpoena to go miss hours of work to go sit in court because the parents were battling over whether their kids should play 2 sports per academic year or 3. I literally was in a case like that. So I'm having to sit on the stand and offer some sort of contribution to the judge trying to figure out whether to order the kid does 2 sports or 3, right? That's not something you should be in court fighting about, right? You should be negotiating informally, maybe with support, like with a mediator or a third party or however you can carefully and competently do it. But that's one of the ways the court really isn't going to be particularly satisfying to you, right? But in any case, here's the so what of this video. Yes, you have the legal process, and it includes certain things that we could call a parenting plan. But informally, you have a much wider set of things that you need to clarify and you need to come to agreements about and create a living document. Create a document on your computer that you share back and forth. When you have a discussion about an element on the parenting plan, email each other after the discussion to clarify what you thought happened in that discussion. Because some of the time, even at the end of a discussion where you think you're in agreement, you may not be in full agreement. All right. So sometimes you have to follow through with some extra clarification, even if you have a really competent civil negotiation around some agreement, right? So email each other back and forth, create a document, and start writing things down. And again, not a document you're going to battle over in the legal realm, but a document that's supportive for you and your kid's other parent for clarity around what's important for us to talk about and negotiate around and agree around, and then follow through with our agreements. And if things change, what do we need to pick up again and renegotiate in some way like that? Okay. So that's the second type of parenting plan. And if you Google custody agreements and things like that, you may find guidance on the types of things to even think about when you're thinking about the informal plan. But again, don't use those as templates for your divorce petition, because usually those discussions of all sorts of elements of parenting agreements after divorce include lots of things that, as I said, I don't think you ought to be including in your divorce decree. Again, that's my opinion. Get good legal advice about what your attorney thinks should be in your divorce decree. But those are the practical issues that I think on the practical level help inform more competent co-parenting after separation. So thanks for joining me today. I know you got a lot to do with your time, and I appreciate you joining me on this channel. And if you like this video, hit the like button below. If you've yet to subscribe, please subscribe. If you know someone who you think might enjoy and benefit from this video, please share it with them, or feel free to post on your social media if you really like the video. The next video coming up right here will be on the legal system.